We're live on Facebook.
We're live on Facebook, so we maybe in the dynasty one again.
Oh wait, no, this is. Wait.
All right.
Yeah, we are.
All right.
On Facebook.
Sounds like we are good to go. Hello, welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Inferno here from RotoHeat.com. I'm Rob Silvers. You can find me at RotoHeatRob on Twitter. Also, when I get a chance, I get on the old Discord and Facebook groups as well. Mr. Sully, how about where can folks find you?
Similar to you, Rob, you can find me over on Twitter at RotoHeatSully. I am in our Discord chat groups as well, and both of our Facebook groups, the Redraft group and the Dynasty group. Bryce?
You can also find me in the Discord. Guys, it's free to join. You can always ask questions, get some opinions on that, and then also in Facebook and in either the RotoHeat Dynasty or redraft pages. Feel free to message me. I'm always on there making comments on stuff like that.
All right. And, well, getting into our news and notes, first we want to remind you, if you're watching the stream live or on the playback, to make sure you like and subscribe. If you're tuning into the Fantasy Inferno podcast, like and subscribe there as well. Follow the podcast. We'll be posting podcasts here every week. Taking a look at our news. Well, the big news today on the COVID player opt-outs, Damien Williams, the starting running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, decides not to play. I don't know if he's still sore over not winning the Super Bowl MVP that he was rightfully deserving of. But that's by far the biggest name who's opted out thus far. What do you guys think about that?
Good, Sully.
Big news, obviously. I think the common thought and theme is that Clyde Edwards-Helaire, his stock just shot right up, and he looks like the primary guy in Kansas City, which I think makes a lot of sense. I really do think that Kansas City brings somebody in similar to bringing in McCoy, in camp last year. And the guy that kind of pops into my mind is Devonta Freeman. He could be a guy. I don't really know. I just don't see Andy Reid giving 300 some odd plus touches to his rookie running back. Maybe it's Darwin Thompson that has some life now. It's really interesting. So it's definitely a role, the Kansas City backfield that's coveted for fantasy, and it gives him some definite ADP rise, and we'll see what happens. Bryce, what's your take on it?
Yeah, it's normally, especially for the subject we're talking about, which is redraft, I steer clear of rookie running backs, especially if they're walking into a situation where they have a proven vet that's going to get their fair share. With Damien Williams opting out, it makes me like Clyde Edwards-Helaire way more than I did previously, because I was steering clear of him in any sort of redraft format. So having basically an easy walk up to a starting role there in Kansas City and in a very exciting offense that is able to easily score, it definitely increases his fantasy value. So that's a huge impact so far on the few players that have opted out of this upcoming season. What do you think, Rob?
Well, and my question is, because I loved Darwin Thompson, so is he now the direct backup there, or how do you guys think that works out?
I think he has to for now.
I don't know who's left.
They have like a Darrell Williams guy that
Daryl Williams.
I think he got more carries than Darwin last year. He might have even. So
he probably did.
I don't know. That's a good question.
DeAndre Washington, the former Raider, is there as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't.
I think Sully's right. They might go out and get a cheap backup.
Well, Devonta Freeman's still out there, so
I know,
that's a
why.
possibility.
Yep.
Which then would help Miles Sanders in turn. So.
And then Lamar Miller, and then all the other dominoes fall, right? So.
Yeah. Yeah, there's lots of options out there. Who knows? Rashad Penny comes back healthy, doesn't have to start the season on the pup. Maybe Carlos Hyde becomes a free agent.
Back to Kansas City.
Although, very possible. So,
yeah, I was thinking
although
about,
I
was thinking about backs you could trade for, and the two backs, at least one that I think would be the best to trade for is in their division, so it doesn't happen, and that's Royce Freeman. Like, that would be a guy to save him from, obscurity at this point. It would be a great guy to add into your backfield, but what are the odds that Denver's going to trade him to Kansas City? Probably none at all. So that's the other thing I was trying to think of, is who has maybe an abundance of running backs that would trade. I don't know. I don't see anyone really at this point other than Freeman, and it not happening. So.
Okay, and I know that this is really our redraft stream, but if you guys were sitting on Darwin Thompson right now and about to make your cuts before your draft, if you had a late draft, would you guys be holding him at this point?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. In fact, I'd be trying to add him even if I don't have him. Why not?
Yeah.
All right. The other offensive players, like we said, Devin Funchess, Marquis Goodwin. For the Packers to only add one wide receiver, their most needed position all year, and then he opts out. That's kind of seems tough from my standpoint. And then, especially being a Packer fan, and then I feel like Marquis Goodwin, it doesn't really mean much. He's not healthy very often, but maybe J.J. Arcega-Whiteside now, or Arcega-Whiteside, now has a little bit more value because Alshon Jeffrey's likely to end up on the pup, so he's probably going to be starting along with D-Jax and Rager.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility for sure. I think, J-Jaw is definitely going to see more than 22 targets than he did in his rookie season. Can't remember the guy's first name, but Hightower, they grabbed him in the draft. I think that gives him a bit of an opportunity in Philadelphia. Kind of disappointed in the Funchess opt-out, to be honest. I thought he had a legit shot to be the wide receiver 2 or the wide receiver 2A with Lazard in Green Bay. So another blow for a team that desperately needs wide receiver help. Perhaps it gives, forgotten guys like Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Ignatius St. Brown. Maybe they have some life now. Don't know. It's going to be tough sledding in Green Bay for good old Aaron Rodgers, I think, in targets. Bryce, what do you think?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It seems like Funchess was going to come in there and be kind of their number 2 guy, and because nobody stepped up as that position last year. So it's going to be interesting to see him try and remake those connections that he failed to do last year. So it hurts Aaron Rodgers more than anything. So, but that Packers team, they'll find a way to win like they always do with the talent they still have around them.
Yeah, they'll still win that division, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly.
All right, and then we got 2 quarterbacks in the news. Tua Tagovailoa passing his physical, getting the hip checked out, and Lamar Jackson still calling after wanting Antonio Brown. And, well, I don't know about you guys. I still feel Antonio Brown basically is a wasted draft pick to me, even if he signs, because he's probably sitting for 8 weeks. So there's no point in drafting him if you're drafting like tomorrow. You might as well wait and try and get him on the waiver wire, because somebody drafts him, they're going to have to sit on him for more than half the season. And redraft leagues, the roster's just too short.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I agree that with Tua's situation, I still think that he doesn't play most of the year unless Ryan Fitzpatrick is just absolutely horrible. So that, to me, it's good for the Dolphins fans, because obviously that's hopefully their hopeful quarterback for the future, which is good for them that he passes physical and he's able to practice and get some timing down and get that get coached up, things like that. And Lamar Jackson, talking about Antonio Brown, his name just makes me sick at this point. I am so tired of hearing about him, but he's a big name receiver that people are excited to get. And like you said, especially since we're doing redrafts, he's a guy I'm steering almost clear unless it's like one of my last picks. And I just like, well, if this guy can be any sort of good like he used to be, he'd be a great almost last pick. So that's my thoughts on those things right there.
Yeah, if I'm playing in a best ball league, I'm going to try to grab AB later on in the draft in sort of a standard, 12 team, 15, 16 round draft. It's like 180 guys. I don't think Brown makes sense to draft. To Rob's point earlier, he's probably sitting for, 6 to 8 weeks when the NFL finally makes the decision there. I think the Baltimore chatter for AB comes from Hollywood Brown, who I believe is Antonio's cousin. So the three of those guys were working out in the offseason quite a bit together. So, you can't blame Lamar Jackson for wanting Antonio Brown in his offense. Off-field stuff aside, like I think we talked about it last week, he's probably still one of the most talented wide receivers in the game if he can get his head on straight. So who knows? When it comes to Tua and the open competition for quarterback in Miami, I fully expect Ryan Fitzpatrick to start the year. But I pulled up the Dolphins' schedule. They open in New England, then they play home to Buffalo, at Jacksonville, in Seattle, at San Francisco, at Denver, the Chargers, the Rams, the Cardinals, and the Jets. So that's like 10 games. I see the Dolphins winning maybe 2 of them. And that's the Jets game and the Jags game. So I'm not sure how long you're going to be able to keep Tua on the bench if he's healthy, if you're 1-5. So by like weeks 5 or 6 or maybe even 4, I see Tua getting some time on the field. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, I agree. I think he's got a good chance to be starting by the end of October at the latest. But I think you're gonna have to stack those guys again, Fitzpatrick and Tua, if you're gonna want to draft Tua. And if you're playing a 1 quarterback league, I don't think that's smart. I'd leave him on the bench and just leave him out on free agency and just stream it. Just be aware of what's going on. If you're looking at going into week 5 and the Dolphins are 0-4 or 1-3 and Fitzpatrick's not playing too well, and you got that guy at the end of the bench you can dump, maybe it's a good time, or you can pick him up. But I wouldn't be drafting him in a redraft league just because, again, you're going to sit on him for who knows how long. And quarterback is such a streaming option in a 1 QB league. So to me, it's not worth the draft pick, but I'd be monitoring the situation very closely, just like with Antonio Brown.
This year's so bizarre, right? Like I agree with you. Typically in a redraft drafts, I'll draft 1 quarterback and 1 tight end, and I'll just wing it in their bye week or stream when I need to. With COVID this year and the likelihood of these guys testing positive at some point during the season, I don't know. I might be dropping another quarterback at the end of my bench at the expense of kind of my lottery ticket running back or wide receiver. Typically, no, I wouldn't, but this year I think I might.
Sure. All right. So we want to remind you guys that if you have questions, get those in to us. We'll go through a few of those at the end of the show after we get through our main subject. And our subject tonight is bounce back players for 2020. Guys coming off of down seasons or maybe a couple of down seasons, whether due to injury or situation, whatever it was. And we see bounce back in their future. So Sully, why don't you kick us off with your first bounce back player?
So I'm going to go with David Johnson, running back of the Houston Texans. A lot of people think he's washed. So what was it, back in 2016, he led all of fantasy with over 400 fantasy points. The following season, injured his wrist in week 1 and was lost for the year. 2018, he managed to finish as RB9 playing for the Cardinals, which had the 32nd ranked offense. I think they had like 2,800 passing yards that year. They were also last on the ground. So for him to pull out an RB9 season is pretty impressive. And then our most recent memory of him was losing his job to Kenyon Drake and looking really old and really slow in the process. Was injured in week 6 last year. At the time of that injury, he was running back 5, averaging over 20 PPR points a game. So he walks into an opportunity in Houston where he's the clear lead back. There's 150 targets at left town with DeAndre Hopkins in one of the most bizarre and craziest trades I've seen in a long time. Bill O'Brien's giving up play calling, so Houston doesn't typically throw the ball to their running backs almost ever. So I see an opportunity where that, at his age, it makes sense to give him the ball in space, and the best way to do that is through the passing game. So I see an opportunity for David Johnson to really bounce back. I don't think he's the elite fantasy running back that he once was, but he is a guy who I think can have a very solid RB2 season. And if things fall in the right, fall in place properly, or he gets more touchdowns than would be anticipated, I think he has some RB1 upside. What do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree, especially in redraft. David Johnson, he's got to have a bounce back year to make the Texans not look so stupid for that crazy trade. When you trade arguably the best wide receiver in football for an old running back that's had a couple good, really, really good seasons, they're going to feed him the ball. So David Johnson's getting put in a position, and like you said, Bill O'Brien's giving up the play calling. So that offense, you would think, is going to adjust to try and dump off the ball a lot more than it has in its past. And he has no competition there. So there's no reason other than him just being absolutely slow and old for him not to produce better than he has the past few years. So if he has any sort of burst or anything left in the tank, I think you're going to see it this upcoming season. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, I think David Johnson has a very good opportunity to bounce back. The question's going to be, do we see pre-2019 injury David Johnson, or do we see what he was when he came back? Those first 5 weeks before he got hurt, I mean, he was a running back 1. And when he came back, he looked like a shell of himself, a shell of an NFL player. So I think there's a good chance with the long offseason he could be healthier than he was over the last part of the season. And I also think that this offense is maybe a better fit than Kingsbury's was for him. But, as far as you mentioned the targets that were available, I'm going to throw those targets at another Houston player I expect to have a bounce back, and that's Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks, he's had concussions. He's one concussion away from being done, but the guy catches balls and puts up yards. And as long as he's healthy and out there, he's going to have a very good year with Deshaun Watson, the best quarterback he's had since he left New England, for sure, if not since he left New Orleans. So I think he's in for a nice bounce back year, again, with the caveat, if he stays healthy, doesn't suffer another concussion. Thoughts on him, guys?
Go ahead, Sully.
I agree. He's a really interesting player to me. He's 26 years old and he's on his 4th team. I think he's had 4,000-yard receiving seasons. He produces everywhere he plays. To your point, if he plays, right? So he's not going to lose out much to Will Fuller, who probably won't be on the field either or limited. Kenny Stills isn't going to take anything away from him, and Randall Cobb I don't think takes away a ton either. So Houston's probably going to throw the ball a lot more than they did last year. I think that the team is not as good as it was. So I don't see any reason why Brandon Cooks, if he stays healthy, why he's not having a nice middle of the pack wide receiver 2 season with upside. So I agree.
Yeah, I'm all over the Brandon Cooks train this year. I bought him in a couple leagues because of that void, that obviously that huge void that's being left with DeAndre Hopkins being gone, and someone has got to take those catches. And Will Fuller isn't going to take it because he will get hurt after about 3 catches in every game. It's probably the most injury-prone receiving core in the NFL right now. But if Brandon Cooks can stay healthy, he's definitely one of the most productive wide receivers. I think other than last year and then his rookie year, the only 2 years that he hasn't put up over 1,000 receiving yards.
Yeah.
So with him being a clear, and last year he arguably was the number 3 receiver on his team. Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods that was a great receiving core over there in Los Angeles. So him coming to this organization, and it's still, if they can stay healthy, a solid receiving core overall. But if he can stay healthy, he's definitely the number 1 and a guy that I think that Watson's going to look to early and often, especially through the middle and the outside, because Will Fuller's more of your deep ball guy. So I like Brandon Cooks for this upcoming year, and definitely a good bounce back candidate.
Oh, go ahead, Bryce. Who's your first guy on the bounce back side?
All right, my first guy is running back. It was also a change of scenery player. We talked about earlier. It's Todd Gurley for now the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons.
Atlanta Falcons.
The Falcons. So the Todd Gurley last year ended up as running back 14. That's not terrible, especially with all the injury news that we where everyone was concerned about this upcoming season. But when you come off of the 2018 season where you were running back 2 in fantasy, it was a disappointment and definitely a year that he had a huge slump. Dropped 12 spots. So I think you can look him to have a little bit of a bounce back, not a huge one to where he's going to be back in the top 5, but for redraft, I absolutely love him for his value. I could see him eclipsing back into the top 10 because Atlanta, again, is a team that has a lot of weapons, a good veteran quarterback, and they're going to be able to move the ball and get down in the red zone, and he's going to have a lot more chances to get touchdowns. So, and he can score. Last year, touchdowns wasn't his problem. It was yards. So if he can continue to get the touchdowns that he has been getting, but then also tack on some more yards, unlike he did last year, I think that you're going to see Todd Gurley have another top 10 running back season for this upcoming year. What do you think, Silvers?
I think we're going to see about the same season from Todd Gurley as he had. I don't think Atlanta's line's very good. I think they proved that last year. Devonta Freeman struggled. Ito Smith struggled to run the ball. Now Todd Gurley's better than both of those guys for sure, but their line their line is not very good as far as run blocking goes. He's going to have the touchdown opportunities in that. The question for me there though will be, do they put the ball in Matt Ryan's hands and Calvin Ridley's hands at the goal line as they have so often over the last couple of years, or do they change it up and maybe hand the ball off a little bit more? I really expect a pretty similar season from him, but I'm not going to be surprised with 10, 12 touchdowns. Sully, what do you think?
I think to Bryce's point, touchdowns weren't a problem last year. Yards were. What was really interesting with the Rams' usage last year is they stopped throwing him the football for some reason, and his touches dropped dramatically. So we heard all offseason last year about this knee and how concerned we are, and we all fell in love with Daryl Henderson and all the other types of things that were going on in Los Angeles. And Gurley played in 15 games last year, so he stayed relatively healthy. His workload was dramatically reduced. So to me, the problem was workload. And he's on a 1-year, $6 million deal in Atlanta. I fully expected them to draft a back in the draft, and they really didn't. Brian Hill's not an issue. Ito Smith's not an issue. Quadre Olsen, maybe. But Gurley's the man. And I think they're going to feed him a lot. I think he's going to get a ton of touches. He's going to get as much as he can handle in Atlanta. And, maybe Atlanta's run blocking isn't the greatest, but the Rams are the 26th ranked rushing offensive line last year. So I think that's sort of a transitive property, for lack of a better term. And the other thing is Austin Hooper's gone, and I don't think Hayden Hurst is Austin Hooper. And I think a lot of those targets go to Gurley. So I think he bounces back. I don't think he's an RB1. I think he's an RB2 knocking on the door. But I call him a bounce back.
All right, Sully, why don't you give us your second guy?
My second guy is Cleveland Browns wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. So last year, he was targeted 133 times. He had 74 catches for a little over 1,000 yards, and I believe it was 4 touchdowns. And he played the entire season with a sports hernia injury. So an injury that would keep most people from getting out of bed in the morning. He played a full season in the NFL. Where it dramatically impacted him, in my opinion, was red zone. He almost no targets in the red zone last year. So I see him as a massive positive touchdown regression guy this year. Add into the fact that Jarvis Landry's hip is pretty questionable, and we're not sure if he's going to start the season in week 1 or if he's going to land on the PUP or how many games he's going to miss, if any. So there's that opportunity. And Kevin Stefanski coming in and taking over for Freddie Kitchens is a massive upgrade for that entire offense. They drafted who's the lineman they drafted? Jarek Wills.
Yes.
And they also signed Jack Conklin. So that improves their guard play, which was horrific last year. So that improves Baker Mayfield's opportunity. Kevin Stefanski loves the play action pass. The Vikings led the NFL with 14 play action passing touchdowns last year. Baker was third with 9, so it's a good component of his game. And his passer rating was up 36.8 on plays they ran play action versus straight drop back passes. So I think the whole offense in Cleveland gets better. I still believe Odell Beckham Jr. is an immense talent, and he can't help but bounce back from a season that was disappointing by his standards. I think he finished as wide receiver 25 last year.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance for a bounce back, but we've been looking for a bounce back now from Odell for the last 3 years. Obviously, last year complicated a bit with the injury. We also, if we're going to have an Odell bounce back, that means we need a Baker Mayfield bounce back. And, if Jarvis Landry's down, does that happen? I don't know. I think it helps Beckham if Landry is hobbled a little bit, because a lot of those extra targets will come his way. But he was targeted plenty. He still had 1,000 yards. It was a good season. It just wasn't an Odell season. But my concern is, even without the injuries, we haven't seen that the last couple of years, and I don't know if he's the same player that he once was. Bryce, your thoughts?
Yeah, Odell was a guy I wanted to put on my list. It did seem like something was wrong with him last year, but he wants to be in Cleveland. That's a big thing too. He didn't want to be in New York, and I think he wants to perform. If he's playing the whole year with a sports hernia, that's just extremely impressive that he was even, like Sully said, able to get out of bed. Let alone play on the football field. His talent speaks for itself. He's literally a human highlight reel. And I feel like with the new coaching staff, they have to force the ball to a star player like that. And like you said, with Jarvis Landry being hurt, you got to get Odell Beckham Jr. more involved in the game. You're going to have to be successful. That offense is arguably the most high-powered offense in the NFL, other than maybe obviously the quarterback position. So. Yeah. I love Odell Beckham Jr. for a bounce back player. He's in a perfect situation for it if Baker Mayfield can at least be an average quarterback.
Bryce, how about your second guy here?
Alrighty, my second guy might be a little biased, but I'm going to go with Tom Brady. So Brady, obviously, biggest offseason move this year, other than maybe Hopkins, because Brady's obviously not in his prime anymore, but he's going into an amazing situation there in Tampa Bay. By probably easily the most talented group he's had around him in the skill position offensively. We got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. He's got Gronk back, O.J. Howard. The only obviously question is in the running back situation, but when has Brady ever had a great running back? So he doesn't need one. If one can at least just catch the ball and run 5 yards, he's going to be fine in that sense, and if they can pick up blocks. He did a little better than most people thought, but when you're talking about one of the all-time greats, you expect him to always be a top 10 quarterback in fantasy. Last year ended up quarterback 11. The year before that, quarterback 12. I think you can see him get back into the top 8 with the talent around him. He's not going to throw 50 touchdowns like he did in 2007, but I think you can see him getting back into the 30s. The past 2 seasons, he's gone into he's had regression 2 years in a row, and I think you can see a little bit of a bounce back this upcoming year with him getting back into the 30 touchdowns and maybe even getting a few hundred more yards on his season. So he was more of an obvious choice for this because of the situation he moved into, but I think it needs to be touched up on when you're talking about this subject. So what do you think? So what do you think about Brady this upcoming year?
I agree. My only thing I would question is whether or not he can bounce back, because he has been a top 12 quarterback pretty much his entire career. So what I will say is that for him to finish his QB 11 and QB 12 in the last 2 years with the receiving core that he had is incredibly impressive. And to your point, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, 3 pass catching capable tight ends. We're, like you said, running back, who knows what we'll see out of Rojo and Keyshawn Vaughn, but I do think that they'll be complementary pieces. I watched a video on Twitter of him running practice today, and honestly, I was like pumped up just how in control he is. They had kind of him mic'd up, and how he's coaching guys as he's throwing them passes is cool. And that's the part that I think is the most exciting. They're talking about blending Arians' offense with what Tom likes to do. It's going to be a heck of an offense. And no, he's not going to throw for 5,000 yards like Jameis did. He's not going to throw for 50 touchdowns, but is he going to throw for 4,500 yards and 35 touchdowns? I don't see why not. And he's also not going to turn the ball over 30 times like Winston did. So I think he's going to have his best year in a long time, and that's a team to watch. I'm looking forward to, for the first time in my life, watching Tom Brady play football this year. So it's going to be fun. Silvers, what do you think?
Yeah, I think he's got great weapons around him. The stats you just threw out, 4,500 yards, 35 touchdowns, if that becomes a reality, I mean, he's looking at around quarterback 4, quarterback 5, based on last year's numbers, if he can put up those kind of numbers. Because that would be another 11 touchdowns, would get him about 44 extra points. That would take him right up into the 305 point range, 300 to 305, and that's right where Jameis Winston finished. So that's not even adding in the yards. So I mean, that's kind of crazy to think about, that Tom Brady at his age might have the best fantasy season he's had in a while, maybe one of the best seasons he's had, because he all of a sudden has weapons around him.
They improved their offensive line as well in the draft, and I think the intangible that Bryce, being a Patriots fan, has seen for so long is just how intelligent of a quarterback he is. Just what he gets so much out of nothing, it's incredible.
Yeah, his greatness is more than just his talent. It's more of his leadership and what he is able to bring out of everyone around him. Yeah. So nobody's ever going to say Tom Brady's the most talented quarterback of all time, but they're going to say he's the greatest just because of leadership and how he literally just brings everyone around him up. So and I think that in doing that with a team that's already that talented, that's going to be a scary team this year, I think.
So too.
And well, my second bounce back guy, he's actually my top bounce back candidate for the year. And we've kind of touched a little bit on the Philly situation already, with Marquis Goodwin opting out. But my guy is Deshaun Jackson. There's a couple of reasons for that. So, one, this offense, Doug Peterson's offense, is built to be run like the Kansas City Chiefs. He's from the Andy Reid coaching tree. That's what he wants to run. He wants big plays, explosion in the passing game. Deshaun Jackson, in the one game he was healthy last year, provided that. He had 9 targets, 8 receptions, 154 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then he got hurt. And he had one other target the rest of the year in week 9, tried to come back, lasted basically 1 target, and then was out. So he only ran 4 plays in that game, just 10 plays in week 2. So before he got hurt. So after that big explosion, he only had 14 plays the rest of the season. He's got to stay healthy, but it's clear that Philadelphia wants to have that big passing game similar to what the Chiefs have, with speed, with Tyreek Hill and Mecole Hardman and Sammy Watkins. And you have to look no further than the draft. Last year they brought in Deshaun Jackson, who's the speedster, but now they bring in Jalen Reagor as his understudy, the most explosive wide receiver off the line in the NFL draft this year. Has good speed. Then they went out and late in the draft, got the speedsters Quez Watkins and John Hightower. They traded for Marquis Goodwin, who's now opting out, who's another speedster, track star. They want their wide receivers to have that 4.3 speed that Kansas City has and make those explosive plays. And so I think Deshaun Jackson, as long as he's healthy, as is the theme with a lot of these bounce-back candidates, he's healthy, he's going to have a huge year. The best he's probably had since his first time around in Philadelphia.
Bryce, you want this one?
Sure. I'm not too sold on Deshaun Jackson. I mean, he is a good candidate for bounce back just because the past 5 years he hasn't really done a ton. Excluding, 2006 he had 1,000 yards, and even in that year he only had 4 touchdowns to pair with it. So yeah, he's in a good situation to where Philadelphia doesn't have many proven wide receivers other than him and Alshon Jeffrey. And like you said,
who's going to be on the PUP list?
Yeah, right. So he's the only proven wide receiver right now that's or at least a veteran presence wide receiver there. So you would think Carson Wentz is gonna target him the ball, And obviously Deshaun Jackson is going to go deep. He doesn't run through the middle very often. He's usually an out route guy or a deep route guy. So if he can't, I mean, I don't think he's going to be any sort of – he's probably not a wide receiver I'm going to draft as even a wide receiver 2, maybe a wide receiver 3 on my team. But I don't know. I'm just not sold on Deshaun Jackson. I've never liked receivers like him, to be fair. The guys that are good for maybe 3 catches and 100 yards and a touchdown. I'm always like – I like guys like the opposite of him, where it's Julian Edelman, where they may get 8 catches and 70 yards every game, and it's pretty religiously, rather than a kind of a boomer bust receiver that Jackson has been most of his career. So, but he's definitely a good candidate to have a bounce back. But I'm not going to buy into it personally. What do you think, Sully?
Well, I think when you have like 30 points the year before, you're in line to bounce back first and foremost.
Right.
And he blew up in week 1, no doubt about it, against the Washington football team, who early in the season had one of the worst secondaries I've ever seen. I will say this: he's got a ton of opportunity, and what impresses me the most about Deshaun Jackson is I'm not sure how old he is now. He's got to be close to mid-30s. He can still fly. Like, he hasn't lost a step, and Alshon's going to be on the PUP list almost certainly, and then you're surrounded by a whole bunch of unknown at wide receiver. There's still the number 1 target, the tight end, is Zach Ertz. Sanders is going to catch a bunch out of the backfield, as is Boston Scott. Dallas Goedert is going to be involved. But I think Jackson does have that potential every, third or game or so to do that 3 for 120 and 2, because that's, to Rob's point, the way that offense is built. What I think is really interesting about Deshaun Jackson is we have to worry about his health, but we also have to worry about the health of his quarterback at the same time. They've already lost some key components of their offensive line this offseason. So I'm not going to say that Deshaun Jackson won't bounce back. I'm wondering, Rob, where you're envisioning him bouncing back to. Like you mentioned, you think he's going to have his best season since his first go around in Philly. Like, are you seeing him as a wide receiver 3? Because I'm totally on board. But if you're seeing him above that, I'm not sure I can get behind that.
I think what you're planning for week to week with a guy like Deshaun Jackson, because of that boomer bust, is a wide receiver 3.
Okay.
But he's going to have those big boom games that could very easily propel him at the end of the year into being a wide receiver 2 statistically.
Yeah.
But you're planning a wide receiver 3 and hoping for the bust. It's the same kind of thing you do with a guy like Marquis Brown. You're kind of planning a wide receiver 3 and knowing he's going to have huge games, breakout games that are going to propel him higher up. But consistency-wise, he's going to be a wide receiver 3.
So he's like an ideal best ball wide receiver then, hey?
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. I like it. Am I
all right?
up again?
Yeah, you can go again there, Sully.
All right, so this one's a bit of a homer pick, being a Vikings guy, but it's Adam Thielen. Thielen in 2017 had over 140 targets. He finished as wide receiver 8. The following season, he had 150 plus targets and finished as wide receiver 7. In those 2 seasons, he averaged about 18 PPR points a game. 2019, he had a little bit of injury challenges and didn't play a whole lot and had some missed time, and he ended up with 48 total targets. He finished as wide receiver 64, and his points per game dropped down to 11.4. So what I find interesting there is in weeks 1 through 6 or 5, pardon me, he was wide receiver 9. So before his injury, he was still that guy in that offense. Stephon Diggs is off to Buffalo. I see a Minnesota team whose defense is not nearly as good as it was a year before, that is going to be forced to go to the air a lot more. And once you look at that offense, you have Adam Thielen, and then you have Justin Jefferson, who we don't know anything about. You have Tajay Sharp, who we know too much about. Irv Smith Jr., who I really, really like, but I think it's a year too soon there. And you have Dalvin coming out of the backfield. So I don't really see a way that Thielen isn't targeted 145 to 150 times this season. The Vikings threw 466 passes a year ago, which was 30th in the league. They've got to throw more. The league average, I think, was around 540. So they're almost 100 targets off of the league average. Kubiak's going to throw more than Stefanski, and I think Thielen's going to propel himself back into that bottom of the wide receiver 1 conversation. Bryce?
Yeah, I agree. This is a guy I wanted to put on my list, and I looked, and of course, the Vikings fan has him on the list. And I like it because his connection with Kirk Cousins, and I kind of when we talked about Stephon Diggs a couple streams ago, I talked about how he was probably the most talented wide receiver on that team, but he didn't have the best connection with Kirk Cousins. And sometimes that connection is more important than talent, especially in their case. So I love that what Kirk Cousins and Adam Thielen have going for them, and with Stephon Diggs out, and like you said, a lot of other question marks, especially in the passing game. Adam Thielen is going to be the go-to guy there. So whether he's that great of a wide receiver, like as a number one compared to most other teams, when you get that much volume, he's gonna perform. So I'm gonna like if 145 to 150 targets. That's what 8 targets a game. Yeah. If he can catch, and that's just an average. Say it's a little more. If he catches 6 or 7 of those per game, you're gonna have 100 yards plus and some touchdowns sprinkled in every week. So I would love to have Adam Thielen this upcoming season. I think he's a guy that I'm definitely looking to bounce back, a guy I'm targeting in drafts, especially in where his ADP is at. So definitely a bounce back character. What do you think, Silvers?
Obviously coming back from the injury he had, he's a bounce back. I think he's being overvalued, personally, without having Stephon Diggs in that lineup as well. I just think it's going to be too much focus on Thielen. I'm not sure that the other weapons are developed enough. I think the big thing that is going to determine whether or not Thielen bounces back as high as you guys are talking about is Irv Smith. If he becomes a big play tight end, which as long as Rudolph's there, I don't know if he will, I think that could alleviate some pressure. And then, to a lesser degree, Justin Jefferson. I mean, if he balls out from the get-go, that'll alleviate some pressure. But otherwise, right now, you can kind of focus on Adam Thielen in that offense. We know Kirk Cousins is a good passer. He's been very accurate in where Thielen usually catches the ball. So, I mean, I see him as a wide receiver 2, bouncing back into the wide receiver 1 category for me is a bit too rich.
Fair enough.
And then I guess that leaves my third guy. So, or Bryce, you have your third guy still.
Yeah, I can go with mine. Don't you? Yeah. So this one's more of a long shot. I thought the other 2 I had were pretty safe. This one's more of a long shot bounce back player, and I chose Cam Newton. So Cam Newton, obviously walking into New England, is definitely going to be the starter. He doesn't have a ton of competition there. Personally, as a Patriot fan, I was kind of excited to see what the coaching staff could do with like a young guy like Stidham. It'd be kind of exciting, but putting a guy like Cam Newton there makes more sense, obviously. The thing I'm obviously worried about, and what everyone and their mother is worried about, is what he's got to work with. So he doesn't have much, obviously. Julian Edelman's an older receiver. He runs through the middle really well, but he's a timing guy. Okay, he's not the best at separation. But he can catch heavily contested balls very well, and that comes with timing. He's got Mohamed Sanu, another older receiver, and we didn't really get to see much of what he could do in the Patriots offense last year, so that's a question mark. And then we have probably who's going to be our number 3. Mohamed Sanu is either going to be our number 2 or 3, and it's going to be him or Nikhil Harry. And Nikhil Harry is another question mark. He was injured most of last year, so he didn't get much of a chance to showcase his abilities either. So Cam Newton has got some mountains to overcome. Luckily, he's got some running backs with Sony Michelle. We have a good pass protecting O-line, and then we have a good dump off receiver in James White. But he's a good candidate for a bounce back because obviously last year he didn't really play. He didn't get a single touchdown. But I'm going to even look a little bit further back in 2018 and 2017. He only had 22 touchdowns in 2017, 24 touchdowns in 2018, and had 13 turnovers and 16 turnovers in those 2 seasons as well. New England is notorious for not turning the ball over, so I think that they're going to form their offense around making sure that he gets his confidence up and doesn't turn the ball over. Tom Brady's biggest interception season, I think he only threw for 14 interceptions, and that was early in his career. So I think they're going to help him with having less turnovers, even though that's not a huge problem for him. But I think you could see him getting above 25 touchdowns this upcoming season because I think they're going to work him back into getting him running the ball more. They're gonna be more creative with their playbook. You could always see they wanted to be creative, but they were very limited with Tom Brady. They would do wide receiver screens that led into deep balls and things like that. And they're going to be able to be more versatile with Cam Newton. So I think that you could see Cam Newton getting back into like the top 12 quarterbacks. Maybe I wouldn't draft him as my starter, but he would be a very solid backup that maybe I would stream week to week if I also drafted another quarterback late and didn't like the matchups. So that's my long shot for a bounce back player. What do you think, Silvers?
Yeah, I think this is another guy that maybe looking at bouncing back a little bit too far. I think he's a solid streaming option. I disagree that he's going to be running the ball a lot. I think that's led to his injuries. He's not going to be the same Cam Newton that he's been in the past, in my opinion. There's also concerns with the wide receivers. And Nikhil Harry did not have a great year, although I'm expecting growth. And then you got Mohamed Sanu, who's just a guy, and
Right.
Julian Edelman's getting older. I also have concerns with the running game. Sony Michelle, not only was he inefficient and bad last year, he is coming off foot surgery. I believe he had that in May. So there's no guarantee that he's going to be ready for the start of the season. So who's going to be the starting running back? Is it Rex Burkhead? Is it the rookie Damian Harrison, who saw 4 snaps all of last year? Is it James White, who we know is not a 25-touch guy? Not that whoever is the starter of those 3 would be anyways in that system. But we know James White's better on the kind of the draw play where they're not expecting the run or catching the ball. So it's going to have to be Burkhead or Damien Williams. Burkhead also more of a pass catching guy. I just think there's too many questions in New England. The one caveat that's going to make Cam Newton better is the fact that half of the defense has opted out right now of New England. So their defense is not going to be as good as it was last year. And that's going to mean he's going to have to throw. And as long as he's got Edelman, he could be okay. But somebody else has to step up on that offense for him to have a good year.
All right. Well, if Cam can't run and he can't be a semblance of himself, he's not going to play. He's not going to go in there and throw the ball a lot. This is a quarterback that has, I think, 513 is his career high in pass attempts, and he's only gone over 500 pass attempts one other time. And that 513 was his rookie season. So if he can't run the ball like he has, then it's kind of a moot point. I don't think that he'll bounce back because I don't think he'll be on the field because he's not going to be efficient. He's coming off of a Lisfranc injury that he probably waited way too long to have foot surgery on. And I don't know. It's tough. I think Cam's going to be okay. And I think the fact of the matter is that he's in the Patriots offense. This is an offense that can get creative when they have to. Jimmy Garoppolo was forced into starting through the Deflategate and got hurt. And then all of a sudden they had to go to Jacoby Brissett, and McDaniels and Belichick came up with a way to use a mobile running quarterback. My dog does not like Cam Newton. So I do think that Cam can be efficient. I think he's a streaming quarterback off the waiver wire. I don't think he's a guy I'm going to draft or start.
Right.
But to Bryce's point, it's a bit of a risky call, him being a bounce back. I don't think he's washed like people think he is. But I don't think he's the elite guy that he was either, if that makes any sense.
Right.
Yeah. All right. And, my final guy is Juju Smith-Schuster, another player coming back off of injury. I think we all kind of took the easy route out for the most part, going the guys coming back from injury. Juju last year, the 2 games that Ben Roethlisberger started, he played all week 1, played half the offensive snaps in week 2. Juju had 11 receptions for 162 yards, and was looking fine. But after that, no Big Ben, bad quarterbacks. He didn't have a good year the rest of the year. He had less than 400 yards the rest of the season. He also missed some time himself. And we also have to remember for Juju so he's going to bounce back from that sense, but we also have to remember this will now be just the true first year of Juju being the wide receiver one, because last year it didn't happen, not with Big Ben at the helm. So we still don't really know what to expect. So I'm expecting a bounce back from last year, but I'm not expecting 2018 numbers when he was playing number two to Antonio Brown and put up 1,400 yards and 7 touchdowns. I think this is a prove it year for Smith-Schuster. There's been a lot of talk that he won't be in Pittsburgh after this year, and if he wants to be in Pittsburgh, or even if he wants to get wide receiver one type money, he's got to prove this year that he can handle being the wide receiver one. That's why I think the drive to prove himself is why he's going to be a bounce back. And in order to get that wide receiver one type money, he's going to have to catch 6, 7, 8 touchdowns, put up 1,200 yards without having an Antonio Brown there to steal all the coverage. And I'm not sure that he does that, but he's definitely poised to be a breakout, and he has every opportunity to prove that he is a wide receiver one in the NFL.
Juju's probably the guy I struggle with the most when it comes to doing my wide receiver rankings. And I've had him in the top 12. I've had him out of the top 12. I've had him in the low, 20s. I've had him in the mid-teens. I don't know what to do with him. So to all your points, Rob, I agree with you. I do think he's going to bounce back this year. I think what's really interesting is obviously quarterback play is massive for him. With Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges last year, those two combined to be statistically the worst quarterback group in the NFL. He had injuries himself last year. Deontay Johnson's play is going to be interesting, and how that can take some pressure off of Juju, and either James Washington or maybe Chase Claypool on the other side. So that's going to enable the Steelers to put Juju back in the slot where he did all of his damage when AB was in town. So I don't think he's wide receiver 7 type productivity that he was back in his glory day there. Plus, I think we were talking earlier, was he 23 years old? Like, he's crazy young. He's crazy talented. Ben knows him. Ben doesn't really know the other wide receivers in that offense, so that's a huge benefit for him. The Steelers will throw the ball a ton. They threw it, I think, almost 650 times in Ben's last healthy season. Juju has all the markings of a bounce back, so I don't see why he wouldn't, to be honest. Bryce?
Right. I agree with you, Silvers, when you say Juju's a bounce back from last season, because it was terrible last season. He and OBJ were probably the biggest disappointments in fantasy football last year. Him being,
but you can't do much when you got a duck throwing to you, ducks.
Right.
Duck throwing ducks.
Right. Literally. He was, but I saw his regression coming even at Big Ben. I think he would have had a bad season even if Big Ben was there the full season, personally, because I think he's just more suited for that wide receiver 2 spot at this point in his career. He's like we just said, he's 23. He's just now 23 years old, or about to turn 24. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure he's younger than me, and I'm still 23. So I'm still off the Juju train right now. I don't think that he's good enough to be a wide receiver 1 where some people where people were ranking him last year, and he's still kind of ranked high this year, in my opinion, for a lot of people. So he's going to bounce back from last season because it was terrible, but I still don't see him having a better season than he did with AB there in Pittsburgh, and I don't see a season like that in the foreseeable future. That was a great year. But like you said, he does have all the incentives right now to have a good season. So he is in the perfect position to prove me wrong. So I wouldn't bet against him, but I'm definitely not betting on him. So.
All right. Well, let's move on to our questions. Before we do that, just want to remind everybody, like and subscribe on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our Roto Heat content. I got player outlooks and live streams dropping every day. So definitely make sure you do that. Also, make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast, of course, as well. But if you're listening on the podcast, make sure you get on over to our YouTube. Like I said, lots of great content. Brad Menendez and Jacob Wallace putting out some great Outlook videos for us right now, and putting out a bunch of those. And then, of course, again, the live streams. So checking out our questions here tonight. Got asked, is Sony Michelle a bounce back capability? Or what's Sony Michelle's bounce back capability? I'll go first on that. I think Sony Michelle is basically done. I mean, he hasn't been good he keeps getting worse. He hasn't been overly effective in his career. Last year was absolutely terrible. Damian Harris was a very effective college running back. He's going to get a shot this year, I think. I think his problem last year was he didn't pick up run blocking. And if you can't block in the passing game, you're never going to get on the field. So I imagine with a whole season and then off season to learn that, he's going to be much better at that. Plus, Sony Michelle has the foot injury. We don't know how he's going to bounce back from that. If you guys remember back, 5-6 years ago now, Ahmad Bradshaw had the foot injuries, and he never came back the same and kept re-injuring the foot injury. So, especially for a running back, with guys falling on top of you in a big pile and all that, that foot injury can be kind of reoccurring. I just don't trust Sony Michelle. Don't expect to bounce back, and by the end of the year, I think he's definitely not the lead back in that team.
I think we talked about Sony last week, didn't we, Bryce?
Yeah, well, I don't think he can be a bounce back because he didn't have a much better season his first year than he did his second year statistically. So last year is a disappointment, but he was also a sophomore. So when someone has a good, like, even if their rookie season isn't like amazing, it's considered impressive because they're only a rookie. Well, second year he was expected to improve, and he pretty much stayed the same. If anything, he didn't improve much. But I don't blame Sony for most of his struggles. If anything, I blame the play calling because I watch the Patriots a lot, and their play calling is so predictable. I'm not an expert on play calling or coaching football or anything like that, but when you set up in the I formation and you bring in Sony Michelle, and every single time you do it, you run the ball. It's like you're just telling the defense what you're going to do. It's like New England was trying to play back in the time where that's all they did. Like, we're going to run it down your throat, and there's nothing you can do about it. Well, those teams did something about it every single time, which I think hurt his yard per carry average. So I think it's not because Sony Michelle is a breakout candidate, I think, for one of us. I think for me. So that's why I don't think it's a bounce back because he didn't have a good enough year for it in the past for it to be a bounce back. But I disagree with you, Silvers. I think that Sony comes back from this. I think it's his prove it year. Like you say it for Juju, I think that's what it is for Sony. So I think he's going to have all the incentive to want to get paid, because he's always still on his rookie contract, so he's not making much. I think he's going to want to get paid. He's going to want to prove that he was worth that first round talent. And Damian Harris not playing last year, that's a sign in itself. I don't think he plays again this year. I don't think if he didn't get the blocking in the first year, and now their offense is going to change with a different quarterback at the helm. So then everything he probably just learned, he's going to have to forget and learn a bunch of new stuff. So if he didn't get it the first season, I don't know if he'll get it the second season. I think it's going to be Sony and James White the majority of the year. And, of course, Rex Burkhead's going to go in there and vulture a few touchdowns here and there. So I don't think he's a bounce back, but I think he's a breakout candidate.
Yeah, I don't think he's bouncing back to a lot of Bryce's points. I think he's still a solid running back. I always go back to Sony in the playoffs, and I guess that was his rookie season where he just went bonkers and, scored 3-4 touchdowns a game. It seemed like, hey, like almost everybody we've talked about today, if he can stay healthy, insert player's name here, that's Sony Michelle. So if Sony can get on the field and play, I'm on record. It's like the hill I'm dying on is that the Patriots are going to lead the NFL in rushing attempts in 2020. And they're not going to do that without a ton from Sony Michelle. I do think Harris gets on the field somewhat. And I think James White has a monster year as well. So I don't know if he bounces out. I think he sort of pseudo breaks out. But again, if he's healthy, I think he's okay. I think he's an RB2. Let's put it that way.
All right.
Mid RB2.
We've got a double dip on Tampa Bay.
Nice.
Part 1, is Tom Brady going to throw a lot of interceptions this year? And part 2, can they win the division?
Can I go real quick because my dog won't stop barking? Part 1, no. Part 2, yes.
Yep, I agree. Tom Brady he's not going to turn the ball over. He'll take sacks. He'll take sacks before he turns the ball over. So, and he's shown that many times.
Agree. He's not going to turn the ball over. Don't agree that they can win the division without a very significant injury to the New Orleans Saints. Whether that's Breeze, Michael Thomas, Kamara going out. That team's going to win the division. They're going to be a wild card team, though, I think.
What do you
and a very good wild card team.
Why do you think they'll win the division over Tampa Bay? Do you think the skill positions are better, or what defense? Because I would say the skill positions in Tampa Bay are better than the skill positions in New Orleans, especially when you're taking into account tight ends and wide receivers, all the wide receivers.
Well, I think New Orleans wins 13 games a year, almost every year for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
The depth-wise, the skill positions, depth-wise, are better. But Michael Thomas is still the best wide receiver in the league. Drew Brees is still arguably, one of the top 2 NFL quarterbacks in the league, and Alvin Kamara healthy, along with Latavius Murray filling that old Mark Ingram role. They've got the weapons offensively. The defense is good enough. Tampa Bay, it's going to take more than just Tom Brady getting better. But I think you guys have talked about some opportunities where that's possible. Improved offensive line, improved defense. They have a chance. I'm not saying I don't think they're going to do it, but I think they're going to be a wild card team. But I also wouldn't be totally shocked if they did end up winning it.
I think it comes down to their head-to-head matchups, those two teams. That's what I think the division will come down to.
And that's very possible. Is Nikhil Harry a breakout candidate with Cam at quarterback?
Possible. It's possible. I don't know. Nikhil Harry, I just haven't seen him enough to really form a real opinion on him. He's one of those 50-50 guys. They drafted him to go up for deep balls, but he got hurt early, so he couldn't get enough of a relationship with Tom Brady to get on the field enough. Because, like I was talking about, like with Kirk and Thielen, Brady is more of a guy that you have to form a relationship with him before you get on the field. So, and he didn't have that opportunity. So, I think he is definitely a possible candidate, but that's a long shot as well. So,
I think he's a heck of a lot more of a bounce back candidate than he is a breakout candidate. Again, to my point earlier, is I don't think Cam throws the ball enough to be able to support Edelman and James White and maybe even Mohamed Sanu before he gets to Nikhil Harry. I see Nikhil Harry being sort of the Ted Ginn in the Patriots offense that he was in the Panthers offense. Is, once every couple of games, Cam would fire a 50-yard bomb down the field and Ginn would use his speed and run underneath and catch it and score a touchdown. And then he'd disappear for a while. Never really been a huge Nikhil Harry guy. I'm certainly not this year either. So my answer to that would be no.
My answer to that is yes. I had him as a breakout candidate from the get-go.
Yeah, no, and a maybe.
But this is the one thing that Cam Newton brings to this offense that Jared Stidham would not have, or Brian Hoyer would not have, is his track record with wide receivers, just like in Nikhil Harry. Look at Kelvin Benjamin, big, slow, and he put up 1,000 yards his rookie year, almost 1,000 yards his second year, with Cam Newton throwing him the ball. Then you get Devin Funchess, big, slow, not the greatest guy. He had, in his third year in 2017, when he took over for Kelvin Benjamin, he gets 63 receptions, 840 yards, 8 touchdowns. So Nikhil Harry is definitely going to break out because he didn't break out last year. He can't bounce back because there's nothing to bounce back from other than a rookie year where he hardly touched the football. This is his breakout year. I think Cam Newton helps him. I think Nikhil Harry's probably a better route runner than I remember Kelvin Benjamin or Devin Funchess being. And so I think he's got a chance to break out. I think he's the wide receiver, the player that benefits the most from Cam Newton being that starting quarterback. And our last question of the night, looking back at the Kansas City Chiefs with Damien Williams opting out. If you're handcuffing or looking to get that upside running back in Kansas City, do you go Darwin or Daryl Williams?
I think Darwin Thompson is more athletic, and actually, I don't know. That's tough because CEH to me is primarily probably going to excel catching passes, and Williams is probably more suited to running between the 20s and banging on first and second down. So maybe it's him. But I think Darwin is just an overall better talent. It's a crazy comparison, but last year in the preseason, I saw some Kareem Hunt in him. And Kareem Hunt was just a guy until Spencer Ware tore his ACL. So who knows? Maybe it's Darwin. I personally would, in a dynasty format, want Darwin. In a redraft, I don't want either one.
Right. That's a hard one. I think I would go Daryl, because he just saw more of the field last year. So you would think that he would be the immediate backup. So unless something else is reported right now, I'd go Daryl Williams, but that could easily change. That backup running back position right now is so up in the air. It's really just pick and choose and hope you're lucky. Hope you get the right one. So.
Yeah, I think I agree with Sully here that probably not going to draft either one in a redraft league.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think the upside lies in Darwin Thompson. Daryl Williams, when last year when Damien Williams got hurt, Darwin was still learning, the blocking schemes, that kind of stuff. Wasn't playing much. And Daryl Williams had the job for those 2 weeks, along with LaShawn McCoy, splitting the carries. But again, another guy who's just a guy. He hasn't really been much. He was pretty good for those 2 weeks, but who isn't good in the Kansas City offense? Darwin is the best athlete in that backfield. And, I mean, he can practically jump over somebody. And he's, 5'4", and he can jump over a guy?
Yeah,
that's pretty darn
talented.
good. He's an athlete. I think if it comes to short yardage stuff, it's going to be Daryl Williams, but I think Darwin's going to get a lot more opportunity. I also wouldn't be surprised to see them flexing Mecole Hardman back out of the backfield quite a bit, because they want to find ways to get him touches, and now without their veteran starting running back, that could be a way to split him in there some more. All right. Well, I think that's it for our questions. So we'll wrap things up tonight here on the Fantasy Inferno. Before we sign off, guys, why don't you tell us once again where we can find you?
The usual, right? So right underneath this beautiful face is my Twitter handle at RotoHeatSully. In both the Discord and on Facebook, and I host the podcast, Sully's 2 Cents Fantasy Football Podcast, that drops every Friday morning on anywhere pretty much you can listen to your podcasts. That's me.
Yep. You can find me on the Discord or through the Facebook pages, the Redraft or the Dynasty pages.
All right, yeah, and we want to remind you again, check out both the Facebook pages, our Dynasty, Roto Heat Dynasty Football page, and our Redraft page. And also check out the Discord, rotoheat.com/Discord. And if you got the ability and like what we're putting out for content, become a Patreon. Go to rotoheat.com/Patreon. Also, we got the live streams every night at 9:30 Eastern here on YouTube, and then the podcast dropping as well all over from all of our different areas, IDP, Dynasty, Redraft, Devy, and DFS. So make sure you check those all out on the Roto Heat family of podcasts and live streams. And once again, you can find me on Twitter at RotoHeatRob. Otherwise, join us again next week. We'll answer your questions live again next week at 9:30. It'll be Bryce and I will hopefully have a guest as Sully takes a little vacation, so enjoy that.
Awesome.
And everybody have a good night.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for hosting